I want to explain how Western uh, ideas and, well, I should say European ideas have destroyed the world. Okay? I was reading my textbook, Visions of America, A History of the United States, second edition, volume 1. And on page 22 of chapter 1, um, it explains what, by the time you get to chapter 22, you have the understanding of what, how European elitism is detrimental, how it's dangerous to other cultures. This is this would explain why, the glory of Egypt no longer exists. This would explain why Mexico is no longer an innovative, uh, intellectual, smart, um, group of people. Why the Indians are no longer, or Native Americans are no longer, number one in pagan ideas. This would explain a lot of things. Now let me explain to you what's going on. Let's take slavery, for example. It was a centuries old practice. Let me read this to you. Let me give you the words of this book that explain the idea. Let me tell you what this textbook says then, in other words. European involvement in the African slave trade transformed this centuries old institution into one of the most exploitative labor systems in world history. That means that the African slave trade was already centuries old institution. You can see it in in the Middle East, in other non-European cultures and places, right? So it was already a centuries old institution, of course. But when there was European involvement, it became one of the most exploitative labor systems in world history. Basically, the Europeans destroyed this centuries old institution. Let me continue reading. Europeans developed a racist concept of slavery that declared people of dark skin to be inferior beings, for whom slavery was a natural and proper condition. So the Europeans developed a racist concept, basically this idea that you have dark skin, so you're an inferior being, and besides, you were born to be a slave. Um, you know, it's just a natural and proper condition of having dark skin. As as a consequence, Europeans treated slaves as property with few legal rights or protections. Masters were free to extract the minimum amount of labor. Oh, maximum. Masters were free to extract the maximum amount of labor for them with minimal regard for their humanity. So you could work a slave to death, you could beat them to death, it didn't matter. They had little rights. They weren't even considered human, or very low percentage of, human in them. Slaves were taken by Europeans to the Americas, or slaves taken by Europeans to the Americas were often worked literally to death. As you can see, right, in sugar fields. Those who survived found that slavery in the New World was a permanent and hereditary condition. Now, this Western idea of slavery definitely is just at odds. It's in contrast to the centuries old practice of slavery. Look what it says. Slavery, African slavery. Slavery was widely practiced in Africa long before the arrival of the Portuguese. long before it. So the Africans were already practicing slavery, but it didn't get out of hand the way it did when Europeans dominated it, took over it. Just like they do with everything else, they go into a culture. They go into Mexico, and look what they do to the culture. Look what they did to the people. All they did was bring death, disease, ideas, forced ideas into these people. No wonder that they're not around anymore. Most of them were killed by disease. Most of them were killed by their Europeans' weapons. And what did Cortez do? What did these people do? They took the ideas that the Aztec had and used them against them, like the taxation system. What did they do with the taxation system? Originally, the taxation system what was set so that people could give more to the elites of that culture, and then in return the priest would give back to the community. It was like a circle. What happened when the Europeans came into it is that they cut the circle, and they brought in all the wealth only to themselves. They kept all the gold, they kept all the pearls, they kept all the taxes that were given to them, and gave very little back to the people. And so then that led to the Spanish treasure that's hidden, that you heard about in what's it called, the movie, Pirates of the Caribbean. The cursed Spanish gold or treasure. Rival tribes usually took slaves as spoils of war, but some prisoners attained privileged positions as petty officials, military leaders, and in rare cases, political advisors to rulers. In Africa, slavery was not always a permanent or hereditary condition, and slaves were sometimes absorbed into the societies that held them. So as you can see, and this is just one example, this talks about all the stuff that I've covered so far. So I guess the point of this video is to show how if you want Egypt to return to its formal glory, if you want Mexico to be what it once was, the great nation that it once was, the great empire that it once was, if you want the world to be restored to the point it was when it was wealthy, when all nations were wealthy, when all nations had resources, when Africa was, wow, just, I mean, a center of wealth, a people whose blood, whose veins ran the blood of kings, queens, and warriors. If you want to return that, we have to get rid of the elite globalists, the bankers, the people who want to destroy culture so they can bring in their own culture. Look what they did. Even the missionaries with good intentions, what are they doing? They're destroying cultures. They're destroying beautiful things. That's why we don't see beautiful buildings anymore like they did in Europe. Europe had their own beautiful buildings. You went to Mexico, they had their own beautiful structures. You went to India, you went to Saudi Arabia, you went to China. Look at how things used to be, because Europeans back then didn't infiltrate and destroy, divide and conquer those cultures. They didn't divide it. So the answer is to restore things the way they were by rejecting one world order, by rejecting foreign rule, foreign power to dictate the culture. Okay, that's the answer. It's plain and simple. If you don't believe me, research this. Look this up yourself. Learn, study, always learn. And that's it.